Hey guys, what's up? It's me. My name is Brent. I am the student worship pastor at the Mandarin campus. I'm so excited to get to talk to you guys today. We're in week 3 of our Love-Hate series, and we've been learning in this series about what it means to lead with love instead of judging others, because when we lead with love, we can build relationships, but when we lead with judgment, oftentimes that leads to resentment and hate, and we want to try to avoid that because Jesus taught us that we should love everybody. And so I'm excited to get to talk to you about this. Real quick before we get started, this is YouTube, so I kind of have to do this, but if you would, just like this video and subscribe so that you can continue to stay up to date when we upload new content and new videos, because ultimately the goal is to grow with you guys. And so the more you can see these videos, the more things that you can get in touch with here in our YouTube channel, the more you can get to know us and the more that we can get to grow together. Anyway, enough of that. So, I had something happen today, and it was kind of different. If you've heard about this, the past couple weeks, people have been doing what's called the COVID cuts, or the COVID self-cut challenge, however you want to call it. I know I'm messing it up probably, but that's okay. So, today, I knew I was going to be filming this video, and so I was thinking about it, and I'm like, my beard was getting a little bit crazy, it was kind of looking all a little bit like Blackbeard from Pirates of the Caribbean. It was crazy. So, I woke up this morning and I thought, I probably need to do something with my hair, because I know my lovely wife Jenna is going to be watching this, and if I'm looking crazy, I'm going to hear about it. So I was going to go ask her, hey, can you cut my hair? But it turns out she had to go do something, and I only had about an hour until I had to be here. So I was like, this is it, man. I guess I'm doing it. I guess I'm cutting my hair. So I go into the bathroom and I'm like leaning into the mirror and I'm looking and I'm like, you can do this. You are smart. You are capable, and you kind of know what your beard's supposed to look like, so maybe you can do this. And I thought, all right, here we go, we'll do it. And I started trimming my beard up. I started, knocking down the wild tundra that was up here on my face, and it was going pretty well. And then this thought popped into my head. Well, 2 thoughts popped into my head. Number 1, I miss being able to go to a barber. I really like that they can just cut my hair and make me look really good. I've been told sometimes I look like Drake. I don't know. Maybe. But I thought about I miss going to barbers. And what's interesting about barbers is you never really see advertisements for barbers. You never really see commercials for them. You don't really see anything like on the news. When you get on YouTube, you don't get ads about barbers because they just already have a really good reputation. People already know that hey, this is a good barber. That's not a good barber. You want to go to this one. I remember when I moved to Jacksonville, I needed to get a haircut, and I said, hey, where's a good barber? Got on Google and looked it up, and then asked a couple people, hey, do you know about this barber? Do you know about that barber? And I got recommended to one, and it turned out to be a great idea. It turned out to be a great thing, and I ended up going, and I went to this barber, got a fresh cut, and I was looking good, and I was feeling good. And it made me think, why don't they have all these advertisements? Why don't they have all these ads and commercials and things like that? It's because they don't need to. People already know that a barber is really good. And it blows my mind because they always have business. They're always busy. They always have something to do, just from word of mouth. And then it made me think also, think about all these companies that they do have all these ads. You have all these companies that on YouTube and on Instagram and Facebook and all these other places, they have all these ads telling you that, hey, here's our product. Our product is the best out of all these products and you want to buy our product because we're better than everybody else. And they spend these billions of dollars each year on ads and all these things to build up their brand. And it's funny because you can look at Nike, you can look at Adidas, and you can look at Skechers. They all sell shoes, but they all also have tons of commercials and ads and all these different things to tell you about how great their shoes are. And why do they do that? Why do they spend billions of dollars doing all of this? Well, it's because they want to have a good reputation, right? When you think about different stores and different things that we interact with each day, you think about Subway, eat fresh. That's the reputation. Nike, just do it. You think about Chick-fil-A, the heavenly chicken, the Lord's chicken, and that's the gold standard of customer service, right? Because they work really hard at building a good reputation so that they can get you to come back and continue to work with them. And so it kind of goes to what I'm talking to today, is, all these companies are very concerned about one thing, and they're always concerned, well, I guess two things, because you could say that they're concerned about making money, but you can't make money if you don't have what? A good reputation. And that's what we're going to be talking about today is our reputations. Our reputations are made up of all sorts of things, and they bring out all kind of assumptions and thoughts about who we are and who other people are. Think for a second about the people in your school. Think about the reputations that they have. Even think about maybe what your reputation might be. Do you have a good reputation? Do you have a bad reputation? I don't know. That's one thing that we tend to not think about very often, is like, what do people think of me? Because we're often so concerned about what we think of other people. If I were to say to you, think about the football players at your school, something probably just popped into your head. You're probably thinking something specific about that group. Well, what about the cheerleaders? You're probably thinking something specific about them. If I said, think about the people who are really popular on TikTok. Think about the band kids. Think about the skaters. Every group that I've just talked about probably has some sort of reputation in your mind. And oftentimes, even though we don't say these things out loud, and hopefully we wouldn't, say these things out loud because it might be rude, we often tend to fill the blanks about other people with negative things. We fill in the blanks with thoughts that we have about these people based off of minimal interaction, and we just assume many things about them. We fill in the blanks with negative things now that affect the way that we are going to interact with them later. Whether we know the person or not doesn't seem to matter. That doesn't seem to be important to us, because we have our assumptions, we have our ideas about these people, and we want to be right often, so we just assume that my assumption about this person and their reputation is correct. And oftentimes when we do that, it makes us not even want to bother to get to know those people, because, well, if I already know everything about you, then I don't really need to get to know you, because I don't think I would want to. And I just want to say too about that, I hope we can get out of that mindset. I hope we can get away from just assuming things about people and just assuming that we know who they are. Oh, I know who you are. I heard about this, or I heard about that. I heard what you were doing with your boyfriend or girlfriend. I don't want to be around you. Or I heard what you were doing after school. I don't want to get involved with that. But a lot of times we make that assumption. We assume that because we know one detail about somebody, we know everything about them. And when we assume that we know everything about somebody, we put them in a place that's usually lower in our minds than where we put ourselves. And when we actually take the time to get to know somebody, a lot of times we can find out that those things that we assume about them probably aren't true, right? Where do these assumptions come from? A lot of times these assumptions come from experiences that we've had. When we met somebody who was like that person. I had a bad experience with one football player, so I guess all football players act like that. Or I had a bad experience with this band member, and so all band members act like that. And we just take one experience and we apply that to everybody who's any little bit like the one person that we came in contact with. And a lot of times these things can also come from our insecurities. A lot of times we are insecure about something within ourselves, so it's easier for us to point something out in somebody else and make them out to be this negative person, make them out to be this bad person, because it makes us feel better, thinking that, well, I'm not that person, I'm not him, I'm not her, so I'm doing pretty good. And that's coming from a place of insecurity within ourselves. It's coming from a place where we want ourselves to feel good, so we put other people down in our own mind in order to justify how good we think that we are. There's one moment that Jesus had in his life that can kind of relate to this, and it can kind of connect us to what I'm talking about these assumptions, about these preconceived notions that we have of people. Jesus used to hang out with all the people who were sinners, and they were tax collectors, and they were considered the worst of the worst in Jewish society, because the difference between a sinner and not a sinner, well, it was kind of arbitrary, really, but they looked at these people and they said, well, you're a sinner. That's all you ever are, is a sinner. You're a bad person. I don't want to be around you. And the tax collectors were Jews who they were hired by the Roman government, who the Jews hated, to take taxes from their own people. And so obviously you can see where they would be upset with the tax collectors, and they just lumped them in with the sinners, because they said, you know what, you're probably even worse than them, but we're just going to lump you in with this big group, and we're just going to hate on all of you because you guys are the ones that we don't like. And they made all these assumptions about everything about their lives based on a few incidences that they actually did know about. Well, Jesus would go sit with these tax collectors and sinners, and he'd have meals with them. He would just spend time with them. He'd get to know them, and he would get to understand that there's more to these people than just the sin that we see in them. There's more to these people than just the bad things that they do. And during one of these encounters, it's written in the book of John, in chapter 8, verses 3 through 6. As he was speaking, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. They put her in front of the crowd. Teacher, they said to Jesus, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say? They were trying to trap him into saying something that they could use against him. Now don't miss this part of it. They said she was caught in the act. Literally, this lady's doing something wrong. Pretty bad. It's a pretty bad thing to be doing, and they caught her in the middle of this and brought her into the temple. And so you can imagine how humiliated she had to be. She may not have even been fully clothed. Like, this was a bad situation. This was a horrible situation. And what happens is the people normally, when they would find somebody committing adultery, would stone them to death. And that was the penalty, was to stone them until they died, throw rocks at them until they died. And so the religious leaders were trying to trap Jesus. They wanted him to have to say, yeah, you need to throw rocks at this woman until they die. You need to punish her to death because of what she did. The religious leaders were trying to trap him and get him to say that, because if he could say that, then now he's guilty of getting someone murdered. He's guilty of putting someone to death. So let's look at what happens next. In John 8, 6 through 11, it says, but Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. They kept demanding an answer, so he stood up and said, all right, let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. And then he stoops back down and he starts writing in the sand. And when the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus is left in the middle of the crowd with this woman. And Jesus stood up and he said to the woman, where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you? No, Lord, she said. And Jesus said, neither do I. Go and sin no more. Mic drop. I think we can understand the tension in this moment. I mean, you've got these religious leaders, they're trying to brand this woman as an adulterer, say that that's all she is, that that's all she's ever going to be. And then you have Jesus coming and saying, you guys are really quick to point out her sin, and you're really quick to label her as a sinner and as an adulteress, but what have you done? Think about what you've done in your life. And I'm sure at this moment, these religious leaders were probably thinking, man, like, I've made some mistakes in my life. I've done some things that I probably shouldn't have done. And so naturally, they're going to start dropping their rocks. They're going to go, well, I guess I did do that. I did say those, that mean thing, or I did do this, or I did do that, and I guess I'm not so perfect after all. And they dropped their rocks and they walked away. The thing here is that everybody is guilty of something. Everybody's made mistakes in their life. Every one of these religious leaders had done something wrong. Jesus is making the point that what you've done in your past doesn't have to determine your future. Mistakes you have made in your life aren't all that you are. You are way more than that. You've got more to your life than just the mistakes that you've made. Now, Jesus didn't say that and then just say, all right, well, we're done. You're more than that. Keep on doing what you're doing. He said, go and sin no more. He said, don't continue to do this. You have the opportunity right now that I'm giving you the second chance. I'm saying, you don't have to be this adulteress. You don't have to be this person. You can be something different, but you have to choose to go and not sin anymore. That was such a Jesus move. He flips the script on the entire thing, and he responds in love to everyone in every situation. And he says, when Jesus comes across sinners, he says that, yes, you've made these mistakes, you've done these things, but I'm showing you a better way to live your life. I'm showing you a better way to move forward. And that's what this series is about. That's what we've been talking about for the last 3 weeks. We need to quit looking at people like you're just a sinner. You're just this, you're just that. You're that label that I've created for you in my mind. We need to quit looking at people like that. We need to quit treating people like that, because what Jesus said when he came across sinners was not, well, you're this and you're that and stay away from me. No, Jesus went and got in the middle of their mess. Jesus went and stood in the middle of their mess and said, look, I know you've made mistakes. I know you've done wrong things. Oh, and by the way, we've all done wrong things. Jesus was the only perfect person to ever walk this earth. But he would say to them, I know you've done these wrong things. I know you've messed up. I know you've made mistakes. But I've got a better way forward for you. I have a better life for you than what you're living right now. Jesus proved that we are more than just judgments or assumptions that people make of us. We have something more within us because Jesus sees something more within us. He has a plan for our lives. He has hope for our lives that only he can provide. And because we are people who can find this new life, because we're people who can find this forgiveness in Jesus, we can extend that to other people as well. We can remind them and maybe tell them for the first time that Jesus has a better way for you to live your life. You don't have to keep living in the situation that you're in. So what if this was the approach that we took? What if instead of creating these narratives of people's lives that we come up with, what if we let love fill in the blank? What if we took the time and looked at people from a standpoint of love? What if we did let love fill in the blank? What if instead of these judgments and accusations and these preconceived notions that we had about people, we looked at people the way that Jesus looks at us? That would completely change the game. That would completely flip the script on the way that we interact with people and the way that we treat people, because when we're filling the blanks with judgment and hate, all we're doing is beating that person down. All we're doing is reducing that person to those judgments, reducing that person to those notions that you have of them, those ideas that you have of them. And the way that Jesus looks at this is, no, you're not that. You are something else. Just imagine how much different our interactions with people would be if we looked at them the way that Jesus looks at us and them. So stop. I want you to think about when you have an opportunity to fill blanks with judgment and hate, I want you to stop and think about how others have filled in the blanks about you. I mentioned at the beginning of this that, a lot of times we don't think about what other people think of us. A lot of times we don't think about what people have assumed about us. And it's easy to have a bad relationship with somebody if we just assume that, they think the world of us, but not everybody does. And so remember that other people might be thinking negatively about you just as you're thinking negatively about them. So stop and think about how others have filled in the blanks about you. And remember that when we think about the way people have filled in the blanks about us, remember that Jesus has filled those blanks with something better. And then second, think about how you have wrongly filled in the blanks for somebody else. Think about those times that you have judged somebody without knowing them, when you made an assumption about somebody without knowing them, and fill in the blank with love. Let love fill in the blank for what we think about someone now and what we expect for them in the future. And think about what that might look like if we put that into practice. I want to get a little personal here. Everybody does this. Everybody has these assumptions and judgments of people, and when it comes to church and church people, getting this right is even more important. Maybe sometimes you assume that person doesn't belong here at church, or I don't belong here at church. Maybe you think that, well, that person's never going to change, or people like that always do this. But here's the thing, friends. Statements like those, as easy as they are to make, take Christ out of Christianity. There's no Jesus in statements like that, because when Jesus looks at people, he doesn't look at them in that way. Jesus made it clear with this woman who was caught in adultery that you are not the blanks that people have filled in about you. You are what Jesus says about you. So when we choose to follow Jesus' example, we are letting love fill in the blanks in other people's lives. Instead of taking quick and shallow assumptions and judgments of people, we are thinking of who they are now and who they could become in the future. Just imagine if this is how we interacted with people. If we thought about people the way Jesus thinks about people, and we look at them and say, you are not just your mistakes, but you are something more, and you have a future, and you have a hope. Oh, and guess what? I know Jesus, and Jesus can give you that future. Jesus can give you that hope. And when we treat people like that, they can start to fill in the blanks with love for us too. And we can build our relationships. We can have better relationships with other people built on love instead of hate. Let's pray. God, I am thankful for this series. I'm thankful for the opportunity that we've had to talk about what it is to lead with love instead of judgment. God, I'm thankful that we have Jesus who looks at us and doesn't see us as our mistakes, doesn't see us as judgmental things, but he sees us as what we could be and who he sees us as. God, I pray that we would be able to put this into practice. I pray that we can think about the times that we've been judged, and we can say, I don't want to do that to somebody else. I don't want to be that person. And we can put these things into practice. We can help build people up by filling the blanks with love, and by thinking of them as the people who they could be and the people who you see them as, God. I pray that you'd be with each of our students. I pray that you'd be with all of them as they continue to go through their lives, that they would look at people through a Jesus lens and not look at people through a lens of hate and judgment that the world tells us to do so often, but they would look at people the way that you look at all of us. And God, I pray that you would just help us to build positive relationships, build people up in love, so that we can continue to spread your message of love and peace and grace and redemption in Jesus. We thank you, and it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I just want to say too, one quick thing. If you're new to this channel, if you're new to Christ Church students, this YouTube channel is just a part of what we do. It's not everything. And so if you have not joined a group, if you're not a part of a group, what we want you to do is follow the links in our description. You can go to our Instagram pages, our Facebook page, or you can go to our website, and we want to connect with you. We want to get you involved in a group so that you can grow with us, because that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to grow with you guys. And YouTube is an awesome tool. We're so excited that we have this opportunity to reach you in this way. But it's more than just this. We want you to be able to come together and grow with us, and we want to walk alongside you. So please, if you're not a part of a small group, if you're not a part of what we do here at Christ Church already, please go to our Instagram, Facebook, or our website and let us know that you want to get connected to a group. Thanks, guys, and have a great week.